Okay, all right. So a little bit of background first, just to put you in the picture. This is a little bit of a new departure for me, and it started about just over a year ago in a conference in Singapore when the whole conference was about scholarship of teaching and learning, and they are doing a great deal of excellent work there, actually. If you're looking for research and ideas on this, I would suggest you have a look at the work that's going on in Nanyang Technology University, and the other one in Singapore, which I can't remember the name right now, but there's only two in Singapore, and they are doing a lot of work. And what I realized when I was taking part in this conference and presenting my own work is that a lot of what I've been doing for many years is actually scholarship of teaching and learning, and I didn't realize it under that name. And what it's all about really is to identify best practice for you, by you, in your context, by using evidence. So we're talking here about data, but data means anything that you do in your normal practice, such as, it could be a piece of material, it could be a test, it could be a conversation with a student. But the point is that you use the evidence to develop best practice. So it's kind of related very much to context. It will vary from one context to another. And I'm suggesting that if it's done in a collaborative way, it's both more useful and more, what can I say, more enjoyable, basically. It's always more fun to do things with somebody else, providing you have that kind of trusting relationship. So a little bit of a bit of background about what it means. There's been great work done here at the University of Edinburgh and the University of Glasgow. So here's one definition: intentional inquiry. That's a key word, and we'll say more about that in a minute. And we're trying to really benefit our students, the end user of our teaching. We're trying to improve things so that the students get a better experience. A few other slides. I'm not going to give you loads of literature, so don't worry. So we're fairly practical, but you need to see a little bit about where I'm coming from. There's been a debate for many years, ever since I became an academic, about teaching versus research. Should we be prioritizing the teaching, or should it be more about the research? Should our teaching be informed by our research? And so what they're suggesting here is that it should be opened up, and we should have a more, what they call, honourable term, scholarship, and it comprises a number of elements. So it's talking about looking for connections, and we're lucky, really, most of us here work in a field where the research we do and the teaching we do are interconnected. I mean, all my teaching is linked to my research directly, so I'm very fortunate in that sense. And although the research I do isn't going to find a cure for COVID, it does help us understand what goes on in classrooms a little bit better, I hope, anyway. So key elements here, so scholarship of discovery, integration, application, and teaching. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that. We're interested in the last one. You can read this stuff. I've got some references at the end. So what we're saying, it's planned, it's deliberate, it's about change. We focus on a puzzle or an issue. Now, these words have been chosen quite carefully because a lot of work on professional development in teaching focuses on a problem. And I'm suggesting we should not always be thinking about problems, but we should be thinking about things which are of interest, which have puzzled us perhaps for a number of years, or something which is an issue. I mean, we're all facing an issue right now and a puzzle, which is how to make the best use of technology in our teaching, given that we're all working online. So that's a major puzzle for most of us. How do we make what we do face to face? How can that be reflected in what we do online? And what do we mean by best practice when we're teaching in this kind of format? Keywords here: data and evidence. Everything we do, every decision we make about our professional practice should be based on data and evidence. And if you know the work I've been doing with Steve Mann for some years now, you'll know that we talk about evidence-based reflection, data-led reflection, trying to promote reflective practice in a slightly different way. And I'll come on to that in a little while. It might be individual, it might be collaborative. I'm suggesting collaborative is more fun. And I think, to be honest, the benefits and the results are normally better. And I think we always have to start any research, even if it's research with a small r rather than a capital R, it should start with these three questions. What, why, and how. What is it we're trying to do? Why are we doing it? And how are we going to do it? And that applies very much to scholarship of teaching and learning. A number of stages, you've seen this kind of graphic before. We start with some clear goals. We need preparation, we need data, we need to disseminate that, we need to reflect, and so we go around again. It's very much like the reflective cycle that some of you will be familiar with of various people, but mainly Schoen, the work of Donald Schoen. And I think, it makes sense. It's a logical cycle, but it's important to sort of know where we are in that cycle and what we need to do next. So, key questions. I've already asked the first one. Do we really know what best practice is? How do we know? And what changes might you, as teachers in universities, what might you have to deal with in the coming months? And how might these changes affect you? How do you currently reflect on and make changes? And the last question is the big one. Which aspects of your teaching would you like to change and why? So we're going to have a look at these in a bit more detail now. And I'm going to ask you to go into breakout rooms in just a minute. And Rita's hopefully going to organise that with you. 3 questions, and it's those 3 questions again. What, why, and how? What aspect of your current practice would you like to change? Why and how? Now, I'm going to give you the task now, and then I'm going to present lots of ideas about how you might do that. And then we're going to come back to this task again a bit later on and get you to revisit it. So this is just a first go at it. You won't get all the answers right now. You will come back to it later on. So don't worry. We'll give you about, 7 or 8 minutes, something like that. A good chance to say who you are and get to know one another. And then we'll close the breakout rooms and come back to the presentation. Yeah. So in this group here, what practice or what part of your teaching might you like to change? Are there any aspects or any thoughts on that? For me, it's how to use breakout rooms.
I was going to say we have a whole different kettle of fish now that we've got online teaching. To what aspect of we're talking online or we're talking face to face?
Yes. So, and the big puzzle really is how do we know what constitutes best practice in face-to-face teaching. We know a lot about that because we've been doing it for so long. But what does that look like when we're working online? So things like interaction, for example, which I've been working on for 20 years or more. It's completely different when you're online, isn't it? So how do we mirror some of those practices from face-to-face, or should they be something completely different? And I think there's a lot of work to do on this over the next few years, actually, looking at best practice in online teaching. Any thoughts on that? Anybody? Is anybody there? They are there, aren't they? Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So you can talk to me.
Hi. I what you said about what aspect would I like to change about my teaching, and also, kind of learning how to seamlessly try to fit in other technologies while I teach. So using kind of what I do in the classroom, but also bringing in things that are more seamless, because it seems like we have all these technologies, but they're very separate. I have to go here for this. And so trying to figure out a way to better incorporate those more seamlessly would be a great thing for me to work on.
Thanks, April. I agree totally. And I've done some work on this recently, and one of the things we found, we just did a survey, and people said you need access to more than one kind of technology. So like Rita just now, she's there online, but she picks up a phone and she starts talking to somebody about a problem. You know, you need the backup. You've got to have other resources. You can't just rely on one. I mean, I'm working right now at my mum's house, and I was here a few months ago, and the internet went down, and I was in the middle of a teaching session, and I nearly panicked, but I didn't, because I realised with my phone I could connect to the hotspot on my phone and get the internet through 4G. And I was able to get it back again and carry on. Right, let's carry on. Thanks for that, everybody. Obviously, one of the things we all need to learn more about is to use breakout rooms. And I think one of the problems, I was just saying while you were all in your rooms, is that if we all work from different versions of the same platform, which is, you know, this is what happens, sometimes things don't work so smoothly. So it's about trying to get everybody to use the same version of Teams and so on, you know, otherwise, well, I've just lost the share now. Right, bringing it back. Okay, let's carry on. So, moving on. I want to try and run through some of the ways in which we might actually look at our professional practice. And these are some of the things I want to talk about. And think about how you might use these in gaining closer understandings of what's going on now, and then how you might like to change it in the future. Because really, we're living in a very fast changing world, and we're all going to have to change, I think, in the ways we approach teaching and learning in the next 5 or 10 years, because the technology is moving so fast. And as you've seen with this COVID situation, you know, we're struggling to keep up with it, really, and struggling to, it's not about finding new technology, it's more about integrating what we already have and making it work for us, you know. That's the kind of thing we need to think about. So this is taken from the book with Steve Mann, which I'll give a shameless plug for at the end of the talk today. And we're really criticizing reflective practice because it's very widely accepted as being a good thing, but we don't know much about it. We don't know how it gets done. We don't know how to describe it. We don't have much data about how people reflect on their practice. And we tend to use written forms of reflection rather than spoken. I mean, I've been running teacher training courses for a long time. Many of you will be doing that now. Many of you will have taken them. And you know the kind of thing I'm talking about, where, you know, you tick boxes on a list. You know, this went well, this didn't go well, need to work on that. And I think we've got to move away from that and rebalance this with a move towards more dialogic reflection. So what is it? Well, it's all about talk. It's all about professional development seen as a social process, in the same way that many of us would regard learning as a social process, which involves dialogue, involves talk. I can't think of anything I've learned to do in my life which hasn't involved dialogue or some kind of talk. You know, from learning to ride a bicycle to learning a language to doing a PhD to whatever, learning how to cook even, although I don't claim I do that very well. But anyway, these things all require some kind of talk. And the key word on this slide is the bottom one, mediation. Because everything we do is mediating our learning. We're using PowerPoint slides today. We're using Teams. We're using breakout rooms. These are all ways of mediating our development. And mediation is something we need to really get to understand much more closely. How do some tools mediate learning more effectively than others, and why? And what tools do we need in perhaps the modern world to help us mediate that process more effectively? You know, it used to be stand in a room, have a piece of chalk, a blackboard, and a group of students, right? That was it. That was the ways in which we learned. And that process was mediated by the chalk, the blackboard, and the language that was used. And maybe in some cases, some materials, you know. But it's getting much more complicated these days, isn't it? Mediation involves so many different types of tools, and some work well and some don't work so well. So we need to understand that process. if you look at the book 2017, Dialogic Reflection is chapter 8, and in that chapter you'll see us talking about these things, these elements that you need to have: data, understandings of context, collaboration, tools, and dialogue. And I think one thing you could do as a group is think about some kind of informal network where you might try to collaborate. And I'll give you some ideas about how you might do that later on. Some of you will know this work, and I don't want to dwell on it, but I think one of the problems with reflection, apart from knowing how to do it, is knowing what to reflect on. Okay, now those of you who know me will know that I've been talking about interaction in the classroom for as long as I can remember, and we are still trying to understand this notion of classroom interactional competence. But you see there the key words again: tool, mediation, and assist. They're actually central to understanding interaction in the classroom. I won't dwell on this because I think it's known to many of you. I'll just say a couple of things. The last 3 bullet points are the most important, really. How do we create space for learning in our teaching? And, you know, if we are working online, as we are, how do we create that space online? One way of doing that is to use breakout rooms. Another way, I mean, I'm just thinking of the work I've just done recently, what people have said in this survey. Starting your class 10 minutes early and having 10 minutes for conversation, just chat, which is what you would do at the beginning of many lessons. Another suggestion was building space into the online session where people can go off and have a 10-minute break and come back, keeping things short and focused, and not spending the same amount of time teaching online as we might teach face-to-face. At Newcastle, we've reduced our classes dramatically. Many of you are graduates from Newcastle will know we used to run 3-hour sessions quite often. We don't do anything more than 1 hour now, and that's with breaks as well. So space, we need to create space for learning. We need to understand how do we shape feedback. The ways in which we give feedback to our students is probably the most influential thing we can do to their learning process. And I'm using this word shaping as a kind of substitute for scaffolding. You know, scaffolding gets used a lot. It's what you do with a contribution that somebody makes. It's how you change it, how you modify it, how you help them to improve it. It's a real skill, and it doesn't happen automatically, but we need to work on that, I would suggest. And the last one, a lot of classroom interaction is very kind of static, and it follows this, you know, 3-part structure: initiation, response, feedback. This has been around for as long as I can remember. We need more jagged profiles. We need classroom interaction to look more like a conversation where people are making contributions, interrupting, suggesting ideas, you know, not just teacher question, student response, teacher follow-up, teacher question, student, you know, that mechanical IRF, as it's known, is something we need to try to move away from. Okay, so space for learning, how do we create it? Well, here's a few suggestions. Things like wait time, teacher echo, planning time, and trying to help students clarify and initiate for each other are really, really central to this notion. I've done some work a few years ago looking at American classrooms, and in the US, it's very, very normal for students to interrupt, make suggestions, make comments, ask questions. And, you know, that might be a cultural shift too far for example, your context, where the teacher is regarded as a person of authority who controls the interaction. But maybe we could sort of rebalance that a little bit and think about ways of creating this idea of space. I've already sort of mentioned this. I won't dwell on it. I think I've said that. and I'm not going to spend much time on this because I think some of you are tired now of hearing about this. But this is a framework I created many years ago as a way of looking at classroom discourse and looking at it in terms of a series of micro contexts which are created.
Steve, would you mind elaborating on SETT, because we have a lot of teachers here who might be interested?
Sorry, okay.
Great, thank you.
So SETT is self-evaluation of teacher talk. It's a process of reflective practice, focusing on your own use of language in the classroom and thinking about ways of improving that with a view to improving learning. And it all is centered on this idea of a classroom mode, which is a micro context with clearly defined pedagogic goals and distinctive interactional features. Now, if I can try and give you a sort of an analogy here, we all have distinctive fingerprints, right? Your fingerprints are different to mine, and we can identify people by their fingerprints. Each of these micro contexts has its own distinctive fingerprint. So, for example, I'll show you them in a minute. In skills and systems, let's put them up. Here they are. There are 4. In my work, there are 4. My colleague and good friend Paul Seedhouse has done work on this actually, and he found 6 micro contexts. There's no magic number here. It's just the idea that classroom discourse is constantly changing according to what we're trying to achieve at that moment in time, according to our pedagogic goals. So the first one there, we're interested in particular vocabulary, grammar points. The focus of what we're doing is the language itself, and we need to use language which reflects that. So we would ask a lot of display questions to check understanding, whereas in classroom context mode, we're trying to elicit, get people's opinions and so on. We might ask more open-ended referential questions. So the point here is that there's 2 things. One, classroom discourse is constantly changing according to what we're trying to do. And 2, we need to adjust our language according to our pedagogic goal and not use the same language all the time. And, that sounds obvious, but in fact, people don't do that. They actually do tend to get stuck in what I would call an IRF rut, where it's question, response, feedback, question, response, feedback. And we need to break that mold and think about different ways of interacting in the classroom. Now, there's lots of work on this, and if you're interested, I'm hesitating before I say this, just send me an email. I will say it. Send me an email and I will help you find the most relevant work if you want to follow up on that. So these are some of the features that you would find: scaffolding, direct repair, and so on. Wait time is important, and so on. But I mean, really, I'm pushed for time today, so this is a separate talk. If you want me to come back and do another talk on SETT, maybe when we can travel, I can come back and do that with you, and we can talk about that another time. But I will come back to it briefly at the end, because I want to show a new app that's been developed at Newcastle using SETT. Okay, going back to the different practices and tools we can use to promote scholarship. This is a former research student, Sandra, who's from Chile, and she looked at the use of online blogs, and she really went into the use of technology, sharing ideas about technology by the use of online blogging. And I think this has got a lot to offer, because the work that's been done on this, the research around online blogging, suggests that we're able to construct safer identities online, where we're able to express our ideas, take risks, but also, very importantly, show empathy to each other and show understanding and support one another, So, for example, today, in this group we have, you might decide to set up an online blog. It could be something as simple as a WhatsApp group, or I don't know if you use WeChat or one of those things. Anyway, very simple social media type thing where you exchange ideas, you talk about issues in your teaching, and you offer each other constructive feedback. Let me just tell you about the video. It's the reason I'm showing it to you is because it's actually a project which ran at the Chinese University of Hong Kong with undergraduate final year BA/BEd students, and they created an online platform where they shared their experiences of teaching practice. And it's really powerful when you watch it. It's only an hour, it's only a minute and a half, the video, but it's really worth having a look at it, because I think it's the kind of thing that people in your position could do very easily, where you do a little bit of teaching, you share the video, you talk about it together. Now, you know, this might sound quite intimidating and quite threatening, but if you do it with a small group of friends, people you know well, you learn so much about your practice just using 3-4 minute video clips and some dialogue around it. You don't need much more than that. I've lost the share again now, I'm going back. And honestly, it's worth trying, believe me. So that's just something to think about. Again, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly now because I'm looking at the clock and thinking of you've got other things you want to do on your last day of the weekend. So this is great work by a guy called Julian Edge, who talks about CD, cooperative development. This has been around for many years, and it's based on counselling, and it's where you have a speaker and a listener, and you basically reflect back to each other something about your teaching. So I might say to you, I'm having real trouble motivating my students. They just don't want to interact. And then you reflect back to me. So you're saying they don't join in your class, and then we get into more detail. So it's just a process, and it's worth a look at it. Stimulated recall, again, some of you in the room will know because you've heard me talk about this before. It's a great way of using video as a stimulus for discussion. It's a really nice way of providing talking points, and we can all make videos very easily. I mean, one of the good things about teaching online is it's possible to make a recording quite easily and select part of that recording for a talking point, a discussion. So lots of things to think about there. And that's what it looks like when you present it. On the left, we have the classroom interaction. On the right, we have the teacher's commentary about what's going on in her class. Now, you know, you can imagine with a very short video clip on your phone, a cup of coffee and a chat with a friend, all kinds of things are going to come up in that discussion, which will open up ideas in your professional practice. So this is simple, easy, and not threatening, I don't think, if you get used to doing it. I mean, I'll tell you now, video, in my opinion, and other people like Steve Mann and others, particularly in the British Council, video is the future of teacher education. There's no doubt that we're going to be using video a lot more and in a lot of different ways, you know, going forward. Moving on. Again, I'm not going to show you this now, but many people work in pictures and images rather than text and writing. And this particular person, Jade Blue, who we've been in touch with for some years now, she uses mind maps as a way of starting a conversation about her teaching. I wonder if I can, do you want me to show you this? Should I try?
Yeah. Right.
So what she does is she takes something like, what's this one? I can't, it's sideways on, isn't it? She'll take something like, oh yeah, linguistic competence, or how to involve my students more. And she produces these amazing images of things that she thinks about, how to change her practice, and lots of images, all these little speech bubbles. But the important thing about the way she does it is the way in which she connects different ideas. You see the way she's using lots of arrows and colors and images and so on, and bringing it all together. And what she'll do with this is she'll sit down with somebody and they'll talk about it as a way of thinking about what can I do to improve my practice related to something very, very specific. That's quite an intricate one. She has others not so intricate, but have a look at her website. Great ideas about using mind maps, because we all don't necessarily work well with words. We might work better with images. That's the idea behind it. Okay, so just something to think about. Right.
This would actually be nice for visual learners, I think.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and there are who work much more like that. I mean, my daughters, for example, probably would absolutely love this. Okay, what I want to do now is try and show you another video, and this is something I mentioned a while ago. One of my colleagues at Newcastle, Paul Miller, and his good friend and colleague David Haynes have created an app, Enhanced Observation, VO. You'll find this online. It's simply www.vo.uk. I think it's a very short URL. They've used my SETT framework in part of this work. And what it does is it allows you to make a recording of your teaching, play it back, and tag what you see using particular tag sets. So, for example, from what I showed you earlier with the different features of SETT, you could look for every example of a display question and just focus on one feature. And the video will jump from one example to the next example to the next example. So you don't have to watch the whole video. You can just look at particular features in the video. The originators of this, keep losing you. Paul and John would be very pleased to hear from you, and they will give you a free demonstration of VO. It can be tailored to your context, so you don't have to use the SETT tag set. You can have your own tag set, which would be suitable for what you're doing in Saudi Arabia, for example. They also offer license agreements, so you can use it with your students, and it's a really powerful tool. Trust me, I've done 2 projects with them now using this, and we're about to start a 3rd one. So if you're interested in looking for research projects, some of you will be, this might be something to consider. Let me just finish by saying a few things about this project, which is a project using SETT VO. Okay, this is the project, and so this is something you might like to consider doing. We're doing the same project again now in Hong Kong, and what it was all about was how do we improve our practice. I've just taken the phone off the hook by using this app. Okay, and we had these questions. Can you all hear me, by the way? Because I'm getting a network. Yeah.
Yes.
This is when in somebody else's house as well. You don't have the best internet connection. So these were our 3 research questions, and we had 5 countries taking part with 6 teachers in each country. Now, you could mirror this project by using, universities instead of countries, and having a group of teachers in each country, or each university rather. And the aim of the project was to build this online community. So looking at the idea of a community of practice where we shared videos and reflections on those videos. It was a very, very nice way of looking at teaching in many different parts of the world and sharing our reflections on those teaching. So we went through these different phases: video, reflective commentary, interview, and then phase 2 was these short recordings analysed using the app. We also got involved and gave some feedback on, what was going on and how to improve practice. But the important part of this is the sharing, and that might be something that you might struggle with. I mean, we all struggle with sharing videos of our teaching. I get that. People find it difficult and it's quite intimidating maybe. But we're talking here about what I'm calling snapshot recordings. They're very short. They're 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, but no more than that. And with a particular focus. That's the idea. And then we looked at change. We looked at how did people change their practice? Did they make any changes to classroom interactional competence? What could they do in the future? How might they work together? And that was the kind of last phase of the project. And this is what we sort of produced during this project: a nice corpus of teacher reflection, a methodology, a way of looking at reflective practice using video and dialogue, and then some professional development, of course, using video. And one of the things we're trying to get away from now is transcription. We don't need transcription. We can do a lot with real live video, providing we've got a way of looking at it, a framework, a tool, or some kind of an app. Okay, so I won't go into all that, but you get the idea, I think. You can look at this in the future. So looking forward, there's no doubt of the value of video. And the British Council have recently completed a number of projects where they looked at video in teacher education. And, you know, it has a great future. There's absolutely no doubt about that. There are issues, there are ethical issues, sure, about recording. And obviously, if you're dealing with children, you have to get permissions and all this kind of thing. But there are ways of even protecting the people in the video now. We've got technology which will allow you to blur the image and, you know, blur out faces and things like this. But video is something definitely worth looking at in your professional development. We need more what we call thick descriptions of what goes on in classrooms. So that involves using different types of data, interview data, observation data, maybe using things like corpus-based data, corpus linguistics with more discourse analytic procedures. And there's no doubt that technology has a role to play in reflective practice and professional development. It's there. Lots of work to be done there. So there's the book plug. I told you, 2017. Rush out and buy that now, and then I can retire. And this is nice. This is some further reading provided by the Higher Education Academy in the UK, all about scholarship of teaching and learning. And yeah, well, that's the webinar which I did with the British Council a few weeks ago. If you want to hear about that project, just watch that webinar. It only lasts about 45 minutes. And there's also a paper to go with that. And finally, this is a new departure for me. I'm setting up a small company which is looking at consultancy in higher education, English language teaching, online teaching and learning, and so on. There's a website there which is work in progress. And my good friend Chris Jenks and I are working on this right now, and we're hoping to go live. If you're interested, I can send you more details about that, but I'll stop there.